All right, Enzo, welcome to the Sipping Point. I'm super excited tonight because, and I know I'm not supposed to have favorites, but Italian wine is one of my favorites. Let's say that so I don't get any hate mail.
Thank you for having me.
Of course. So I'm really excited because you brought two very unique and rare wines here. So I'm excited to learn about them.
Absolutely.
But I know you have a passion for wine like I do, and also a passion for making it fun and approachable, not getting so bogged down in the complications. Even though Italy is like 20 separate regions and there's so much to learn, what really brought this passion to you, and how did you kind of get this role as the wine slayer? I love that title. Tell us a little bit about your background.
So, yes, my family obviously has a long history in the wine world. My grandfather was actually a carrettiere, and he was the first to restart the route after the war between Napoli and Puglia through the Canosa route. A carrettiere back in the day was the guy that was with his horse and carriage, took the wine from the rural areas where, the farms where we were making the wine, to the cities or other regions. The first, transportation of sort. Fast forward 50 years, now we call that modern day distribution. But back in the day, it was just the guy, the carriage, and his horse. If you were a big distributor, you had two horses, but that was it. And so he restarted that route after the war. My family always made wine from my grandfather. His brothers, actually, so my father's uncles, were some of the most renowned cantinieri, which would be the vinter of the Campania region for both their own cantinas and other cantinas of the area.
That's
my
awesome.
grandfather, he was actually also transporting a lot of even very important, what today we would call bigger labels, but back in the day, not necessarily. They were a bunch of cantinas that were just starting out. So it starts, deeply rooted. I grew up in Italy where we have a different approach to wine than in the United States. I'm not saying good or bad or anything. It's just a different cultural approach. Sometimes I tell people, first time I tried wine, I was probably 5, and they look at me like I had, 3 heads. And it's like, wait, what you say? It's like, it's a different cultural approach. Here, obviously, you have the legal drinking age of 21. In Italy, it's pretty standard. If you're at a restaurant with your family, even though there is a legal drinking age, which is 18, it's pretty norm standard accepted that if you're with your family and let's say you're 15 or 16 and ask for a glass of wine, you won't get any pushback or anything like that. Again, I'm not judging. I'm not saying good or bad. It's just
It's
very
cultural.
very different cultural approach. So obviously was introduced to the world of wines from when I was a kid. I always loved the way that my grandfather and my father organized the cantina in the land. I was always, really attracted by what went behind it, like the behind the scenes. Everybody always sees, the bottle of wine, but there's so much that goes into it behind that is either directly winemaking or a lot of things that are not even directly winemaking. So I was always attracted to that. I loved helping out as a kid. Poor area of Italy, not necessarily all the money in the world. And before like the big machineries came along, you started off with a regular gravity press. So you're a kid, you want to help out, you see your dad doing it. So you go there and you're just cranking that press, back and forth, or when you're bottling. Today you have beautiful automated bottlers. Back in the day, to be honest, actually, I wouldn't say back in the day because my family still use it, but you would use a gravity drop bottler, which we would call the big titty. Excuse me for the language, but because it resembled kind of like a cow's belly, a female cow's, because you would put all the bottles on the bottom, and by the force of gravity, the liquid, the wine would drop in. There was a little mechanism that would go afloat. As soon as it arrived to level, it would stop, and then you would take them out. 6 bottles at a time, but you had to be manually there to actually do it.
Wow. So you really were hands-on from a young age on the winemaking front.
100%. It's always been a passion. And then I moved here to the States 6 years ago.
Okay.
And fast forward 6 years, here we are. I collaborate with Impero Wines exclusively, and we like to import and distribute unique Italian wines, or as I like to say, wines that we actually drink back home, and not wines that marketing tells you we drink and we have no idea they even exist. And unfortunately, that is the grand majority of Italian wines here on the American market. So we try to do something about that. We're trying to bridge that gap. So it's a huge job. It's very complicated, but we're crazy Italian guys. We're stubborn. And so
I love
we're
that.
taking on the task, but we want to do it in a fun, different way.
Yes.
We strongly believe that wine shouldn't be complicated. Although wine is very complex, some may argue that wine is the most complex thing on earth, second only to women, and that's a compliment to women, by the way. But it shouldn't be complicated. So we like to do fun events, different things.
Yes.
To, introduce and showcase wine in a very fun, approachable way. We like to stay away from a lot of terminology and descriptors that nowadays, you go on social media or YouTube and you see these incredible world-renowned professionals, and don't get me wrong, I think they're incredible professionals, but it's gotten out of control. Like they're using descriptors that are so out of touch with everyday modern world. Tastes like horseback saddle or flowers from Mount Kilimanjaro.
Babbling brook. It smells like a babbling brook. Okay.
Pack of balls from a tennis cat. Like what does that mean? Like
tennis balls. Yes.
It's gotten out of control. So we like to try to do a different spin on it, a different twist.
I love that.
Really bring it like down to earth as much as you can.
But we're on the same level with that. So I'm so glad that we connected and you're here. And the listeners, if they've been listening to the show for a while, they know I often will say, if you can't pronounce it, you should be drinking it.
I love it.
And so I was so excited when you brought two really unique things here that I have to say, I don't think I've ever tasted either one of these after 20 years of being in the business, because I've kind of, have to know a little bit of everything from wines all over the world, whereas you've got this deep dive on the Italian front. Both of these are from the region.
They are. Today, both of them are from
Which is
Puglia.
the heel of the boot, if you think of Italy as a boot. But I think you wanted to start with this wine, which, first of all, I know we shouldn't care about the packaging, but this is gorgeous, okay? With the seal and the little, cord there. Tell us a little bit about what we're going to taste here.
So this is something really cool and unique that is one of my personal opinion, obviously, the most underrated DOCs of Italy. Now, keep in mind, Italy to this day has about roughly 330 different DOCs. This is the Brindisi DOC. It's hardly ever found in the United States. It's basically the Brindisi DOC, a Negramaro blend. Now, this specific bottle from Corte Ottone, lovely winery from Puglia. It's actually controlled by Botter, a very important name of Italian winemaking, and most importantly, of bringing authentic Italian wines to the rest of the world. That's why we love working with them as well. Is specifically Negramaro, Sangiovese, and Malvasia.
Okay.
It's like drinking a hug. It's super easy.
Now that's a great descriptor there.
There you go. No horseback saddle, none of that. No.
Yeah, thank you.
Right off the nose. So I see you started as well. Very approachable already on the bouquet. You get those notes that are typical, I believe, from Puglia, because keep in mind, Puglia, like you said, we're the heel. It's a land where we don't get a lot of rain. Generically speaking, we don't get a lot of rain in southern Italy. I really learned about the four seasons when I moved here to America, like this whole rain, snow thing in the same week. Really bad. Nuh-uh.
Sorry.
But so you have like this really dried out, rich, intense soil under the Puglian sun. Now, I know everybody here talks about under the Tuscan sun, but I think that's like a little bit more marketing that got into it. Like the real sun we have like in southern Italy, Campania, Puglia, Sicily. And so you can get those really lovely, intense notes, most of them which come from the Negramaro. In Puglia, I Pugliesi, which is the people from Puglia, they like to tell a joke there, which is not very accurate, but they say it on purpose I think they want to try to get a point across. They say Negramaro is the California cab for Italians. Now, while they're completely different as grapes, I think what they're trying to say is, how here, like, there's a lot of passion and people really like enjoy a lot of these big, very bold California cabs. They're very much so easily everyday drinkers. You have some that are very price approachable. And so you can have, they're huge mass produced wines, but you have on everyday tables. And Negramaro in southern Italy, especially in Puglia, is kind of like that. It's an everyday, easy to drink wine. It's bigger. It's not as big necessarily. as a California cab. But the Sangiovese, that's really where that helps out a little bit. It gives it a little bit more body. On that
Right.
bite, you kind of like realize, I'm sorry, I'm going to take my first sip as well.
Yeah, sorry. While you were speaking, I took the liberty.
Oh, no, sorry.
Lovely.
The bite already, you get right away the idea that you're going to drink something important, something that's elegant.
Yes.
And this is where it kind of like differs to like some of those California wines. When you drink one of those big, bold California cabs, I feel like after a bottle, I've been beaten up or I've been mugged on the street.
Yeah.
This
The
guy,
tannin is here, but it's not, like you said, punching you in the face.
it's not all
very
about
elegant.
punching your face. And
Yeah.
it's very elegant and it's oriented more towards the back palate. So the finish of the wine, it gives out that elegance. The Malvasia Nera, very small percentage of it, has one job, to bring it all together, to smoothen it
Okay.
out, give it a little bit of that aromatics. Now, a lot of people sometimes confuse because they know or are familiar with Malvasia in general. There's about 20 different Malvasias. Now, usually it gets misinterpreted and we say Malvasia a lot here, but it's always usually kind of like two words. Malvasia di Candio. This is Malvasia Nera. It kind of like specifically like indicates which Malvasia it is.
Yes.
It's not a sweet grape, but it is a very approachable, well-rounded, down-to-earth, easy grape that helps in the blend, specifically of the Sangiovese and the Negramaro. Sangiovese, you know, he's a big guy. He brings a lot of attitude to the table. The Negramaro
Right.
has a little bit of that boldness to it. So the Malvasia kind of like just swirls it all together and makes that finish really, really so elegant.
So maybe it's like a bear hug, and somebody gives you a big bear hug.
I liked it. I like to say it's like drinking a hug because
Yes.
right off the bat, you know, I feel it's very elegant, very warm. It's like a friend, you know, it doesn't want to betray me in the glass.
Right.
For pairing wise, I did an event right before Christmas and I called this my prime rib wine. And so
Oh, nice.
it'll go with generically, obviously, your meats. It's great, you know, from your charcuterie blend boards for appetizers all the way to your bigger meats. I wouldn't necessarily do it with a super big protein on its own, but like a
Okay.
nice little prime rib, gently roasted, where you also have a little bit of the sauce or the juices that are coming that are essential part of the dish. It'll work
Right.
really, really nice with it.
And you could do it with some white meats too, right? Like we love a pork tenderloin here.
We do too in Italy, although there's one white meat where we really disagree cultural
Okay.
wise, which is rabbit.
Okay. Oh no, I've had some great rabbit ragu in Italy, and I have no problem with it.
We love rabbit. I know it's
Yes.
not necessarily everybody's a cup of tea, but
Yes.
it's lovely, especially if you do like rabbit cacciatore, which what
Okay.
pretty much gave birth to. There's a lot of like Italian American places here that they'll do the dish chicken cacciatore. That actually kind of like came into play because it's in the traditional Italian dish done with rabbit. Rabbit doesn't really play well here with the restaurants, so
Yes.
they took a spin and they subbed it with chicken. Not saying that it wouldn't do good with chicken, but like pairing rabbit cacciatore with the glass of the Brindisi Rosso, absolutely amazing. It's also a very
Oh.
lovely meditation wine, or as I like to call it,
I was
couch
just going to
wine.
say that the Italians, it makes it sound good. I will often say, well, you know, this is great with a meal, but maybe not your porch pounder.
No,
But the meditation wine, you know, like is a wine you just might have without food, is the way I understood it when because they would kind of
Absolutely.
make fun of us because we would drink like a Barolo after dinner and they're like, oh no, like this is such a fancy wine. Why are you drinking it at the end of the night? But many of the producers would describe their wines as a meditation wine, which is really interesting.
it is. My personal take on it here, I like to call it couch wine. The concept is exactly
Everybody
the same.
gets that, yeah.
You know, you're on your couch. You know, your Netflix is on. You're watching something nice. You just have a nice glass, easy to drink. You know, but the whole point is, it's going to be easy to drink even on the couch. It's not going to knock you out. So it's
Yeah.
not that again punch in the face. Just sit back,
And
relax.
just to give me an idea of the retail price on this, I know it'll vary based on the store, but in general, around.
It's not a bottle that breaks the bank. It's usually like
Okay.
in the 18.99 ish
Perfect.
kind of
Under
department.
20.
Under 20.
People love that. Yeah.
I always like to say, especially the mission, what we do and how we like to do it, you should be able to drink great Italian wine or great wine in general. That should never be two things. It should never be complicated, it should never be super expensive. I'm not saying that there's not great expensive wines. Of course there are.
Yeah.
But that shouldn't be like the threshold. That shouldn't be the standard. You should be able to drink a great bottle of wine that doesn't break the bank. And again, not complicated. This wine, it's not complicated. It's like I said, it doesn't portray you. It's very transparent. He tells you exactly what he is, what you're going to be drinking, that beautiful, lovely finish. And at the end, you're going to want more, and it's not going to kick your butt, and knock you out. It's not. It's not a street mugging.
I think 14% alcohol when I was looking at the sheet. And then one thing I just wanted to backtrack to, just in case people aren't aware. So, in Europe, many countries have a classification system for the wines. In Italy, it's the DOC system. Of course, you have your table wines and you have some IGT wines that break the rules. But the two classification systems we often talk about are DOC, which you mentioned with this wine, and then the DOCG, which is kind of, the higher of the pyramid, if you will. We have
the pyramid.
Yes.
This is an argument that usually gets me in a lot of fights here in the States, because somehow, and I actually get why, but American marketing really tried to do a spin on this.
Okay.
And they try to spin it as a quality pyramid. Now, in Italy, so where we invented it, the Italian government, it is in no form or way actually structured as a quality pyramid. It's actually quite different. It's more intended for quantity, rules and regulations, and geographical origin. And that's to protect our product. So in Italy, we are stubborn and very, very proud of our wine. It's unfortunate. It's the way it is. It's one of the reasons why so many Italian producers won't export for all the money in the world. It's actually quite often there's incredible little gems, and they've been approached by so many entrepreneurs or huge companies or brokerage firms or anybody, and it doesn't matter to them. We're very, very proud of our product. So that pyramid kind of really helps make sure that our product stays intact, unique. It doesn't get falsified. It doesn't get cloned in any form or way. And it starts at the top with DOCG, di origine controllata e garantita, which means of controlled and guaranteed origin. What does it mean? It means that those DOCGs, now we have 77 DOCGs currently in Italy. Those DOCGs are regulated in the disciplinare. The disciplinare is, think of it as kind of like this huge rule book, which is sanctioned by the Italian government. And it says all the do's and don'ts, including DOCs, DOCGs, IGTs, and table wines. And it's going to say a DOCG can be produced in a very specific area, usually very small, with very specific methods, harvested in a very specific way. Sometimes it'll go as much as in when it can be harvested and how it can be harvested. It'll say what grapes you can grow. It'll literally give you the entire, all you can or cannot do. But the major thing is very small area, a whole bunch of rules, DOCG. Then right underneath it, we have DOC, di origine controllata. Of controlled origin, we lost the G, we lost the guaranteed.
Yeah.
Sum it up, a little bit bigger area, a little bit less rules, a little bit more relaxation. The vinter, the winemaker, has a little bit more wiggle room, per se. This helps a lot, especially on some of the DOCs, which are blends. Like in this case, it'll give usually, for example, a goalpost range. The majority has to be, for example, in this case, the majority has to be Negro Amaro, but it'll say you can use in the blend Malvasia Nera, Sangiovese. It'll even say you can use, actually, the Brindisi Doc says you can even use Montepulciano, but it'll also give you the goalpost ranges of the percentages. So bigger area.
That is such a great way of explaining it, because I do think really, even in some of my SOM training, it is kind of portrayed as a quality, okay, this is the lower level of the pyramid. That's your table wine. Although I've been in Italy and had fabulous table wine.
It's our best wine.
Yeah. So I mean, we're all jealous of that here, because you can't go buy a U.S. wine for $7 and get the quality of the wine that I've had for €7.
€7? You were shopping in the wrong places. You shouldn't be spending more than $3.
But then you have your IGT, which they get more wiggle room, and they can use weird grapes.
after Parker's incredible push on Super Tuscans. Because keep in mind,
Yes.
Parker used the term Super Tuscan, I believe, first. I love how he used it, describing these rule breakers outside of the Chianti region, using these Bordeaux-style blends, like these crazy Italian nut jobs, but that were making this incredible, beautiful, powerful wines. They weren't classified. What were they? And this was like a huge problem, like for the American system. It's like, okay, wait, it's not a DOCG, it's not a DOC. What
And
is
it's
it?
not a table wine.
But
Yeah,
what is
right.
it? Fast
Yeah.
forward 92, the Italian government comes with IGT. Here's where I think, in my opinion, it was kind of like made specifically for this because indicazione geografica tipica, which translates
Yes.
to of typical geographical origin. What does that mean? Absolutely nothing.
I
Where's
was
it
going
come
to say,
from?
because it's not typical
Over there.
because you're using Cabernet or whatever.
Where's it come from? Somewhere over there. I don't know. It's kind of like it was put there so to bridge that gap between the DOC and the table wine, but also to give like a category where in IGTs is the area where there's kind of like a lot of wiggle room. So usually they tend to be a very vast area. Some of the IGTs, we have a lot of them now. There's about 120 and counting. It's actually the category that moves the most by the Italian government. Sometimes they'll be to a point where the IGT is actually the entire region.
Okay.
Yeah, they're much bigger areas, much more wiggle room. Usually some will get into like the blends, for example, and they'll list like the blending grapes, and it'll be the longest list ever. There'll be like even like 15, 20 different.
And the thing is, you can have good and bad wine in any of the 4 categories on the pyramid.
Absolutely.
So it's really about finding someone like yourself or an importer that you really vibe with, a store that really can help you. Because just because it's from, a specific DOC or DOCG for that matter, doesn't mean you're going to love every wine that comes out of that region.
100%. Because it's not a quality pyramid, I was saying. Now, generically speaking, does the pyramid express quality in the DOCGs?
As you go up?
Yes. I won't even say as you go up, specifically DOCGs. Why? Because it's so highly regulated to protect itself that chances are there's so much love and passion because the winemakers themselves, to jump through all those hoops, they're not going to do it if they're not going to want to like dish out something incredible. That said, there are some DOCGs that I think are absolutely, horse poo-poo, but it is what it is.
Well, speaking of something incredible, I'm really excited to taste this next wine. So maybe this will be a good segue for us to continue on our DOC talk. But you brought me another wine here and a grape that I have never tried before. So tell us a little bit about what we have with our second selection here. And I'll put the links to all of these on my website. So listeners, you can try to search these out wherever you're at.
Absolutely. So this is the Susumaniello. So Susumaniello is, I think, the mecca of wines for the wine geeks in the room. And yes, I do think I'm a wine geek. Yes. It's an ancient Roman grape.
Me too.
It's one of the 3 ancient Roman reds. We have tons of literature on it. Most of it is in Latin because of the Romans, obviously. It was one of their grapes of choice. It came after a lot of conquest of the Penisola di Dalmazia, the Dalmatian Peninsula, out of modern-day Croatia, pretty much, because it is a distant cousin of the Primitivo grape, which also actually came from there and then eventually found its way to the United States, and they called it Zinfandel in California.
And I believe I had a Primitivo from this producer. Do you have that in the market as well? Okay,
yes,
so
yes.
I did taste that.
Yes, so we actually do import a Primitivo from this producer. The Susumaniello is a distant cousin of the Primitivo. It's an incredible, incredible grape. The name, which is a huge part of the story, actually translates to donkey or little donkey. And because it's a grape with a peculiar nature, it has an incredible high yield on the first year or the first years, but then it dies down drastically. And so that's the problem. And that's why nobody's ever heard of it, or very few people have heard of it until recently, because it was considered extinct, or so they thought. More than extinct, the truth is it was kind of like purposely forgotten. Because keep in mind, throughout the years, especially in medieval times, you're in a region of the world, constant conflicts, money is always a problem, the lands need to produce. This is a grape where it just wasn't making people money. So it's kind of like purposely forgotten. It was refound by chance after the war. Long story short, took them a long time. They rebuilt the estates. They brought it to the States. They started, producing again, harvesting. The first bottle was only exported, and keep in mind, for something that exists for more than 2,000 years, and this is where the wine geek in me like really goes bananas, was only exported in 2001. I think that's like just incredible.
Wow.
This is an incredible expression of a wine because being the cousin of the Primitivo, right on the nose and the bite, it's very much so similar. It's big, bold, deep, rich red fruit bomb. But then where it really changes is on the back palate. I like to say it's Puglia meets Valpolicella because it reminds me of Valpolicella wines, and that's actually how it's harvested and produced. You get that raisiny finish almost, a little bit of that like leather silky texture that reminds me a lot of Valpolicella wine. So I like to say this is Puglia meets Valpolicella. This wine is truly majestic. One word, majestic. It also has a very
really is gorgeous,
unique award. It's the first wine ever that was awarded on the same year, both 99 points and voted best red overall in the Annuario del Vino. No bottle has ever achieved that. Many have done that on separate years, separate vintages.
And this is an Italian
yes, it's an Italian
rating?
From, yes, from Luca Maroni.
Okay.
Now, the point system, we're not necessarily a fan of it. You know, that's a whole different conversation. But the best overall, it's done in a completely different way. It's the blind tasting, L'Annuario del Vino. There's a lot of peers involved, more than newspapers, critiques. It's really cool.
Oh, nice.
It's achieved that in 23, and it just redid it in 24 as well. That's why they proudly put that little stem, that little label. They put the numbers really big because, to be honest, for the American market, people like the ratings. But more importantly, if you read around that little circle from the Luca Maroni, and you'll see it, and you'll see the achievement, Annuario del Vino, Miglior Vino Assoluto, best wine overall.
Wow.
I think that's simply fantastic. Like I said,
is this in the same price range as our?
It's a little bit. It's a little bit more expensive. It's still approachable. It's just over 20. Usually, like it's in the 22 range. Again, depending on
that's still great
stores and states. I really think so. To be honest,
when you guys see this, it's so dark, it's so inky in color, you know, from the grape that I'm just learning about here. And is there a little bit of spice that I'm catching on that nose as well?
It is. You have you get the spice, you get it on the nose and you get them on the bite too. And then it's like, I call it the transformer wine because then from that bite to the finish on the back palate, it gets that little bit of involvement where I like to say it kind of like resembles those Valpolicella wines. So compared to the Primitivo, it gets that lovely raisiness.
Yeah.
It gets a little bit of that leathery silk. It reminds kind of like a little bit like, quote unquote, gently speaking with a grain of salt, a little bit like an Amarone finish.
Yes, I was just saying my husband absolutely loves Amarone. That's his favorite. And I'm going to have him take a sip of this because he's going to be like, ooh, I like this one. But yeah, and both of these, and one of the reasons why I love European wines, and more specifically, I guess, you know, what we're talking about is Italian wines, is that it is so balanced. I mean, yes, it's 14.5%, I think, this one. So maybe a little bit more alcohol, but it's still pretty balanced with all the tannin, all of the finish. Is there any oak on this?
There is. There is just a little bit, not a lot.
Okay.
The same thing with the Brindisi Rosso Riservas, a little bit of oak. That is a Riserva, so it does require 2 years aging by law in the Disciplinare, of which 6 months have to be, at least 6 months have to be an oak. Okay. So they both have a little bit of oak, but both of them have two very different wines, but have this characteristics, kind of like you said, well balanced. You can get a little bit from the wood barrel, but it's not overpowering, which kind of like really brings it together, giving it that like really smooth, elegant finish as well. I like to tell everybody, I think this Susumunillo is so incredible. And to be honest, every time we do an event and we've showed this, it's by far the favorite and the bestseller. Like,
maybe we need like a short, like, can we just call it Susu?
We do call it Susu, actually.
Okay. That might kind of make it a little bit easier. I do find that, especially, probably not in Italy, but here in the States, people are so nervous about saying it wrong or not understanding, like, yeah, but what is it? And so
that's true. And I think a lot of it also has to do like how the marketing system works here, because if you walk in to your average liquor store bottle shop, and by the way, I really like average because obviously there's a lot of incredible players out there that take a lot of pride and like literally bring in like the most cool, unique things. But when you go into the Italian section, chances are you're going to see the same 25 grapes over and over again, and a gajillion of them. You're going to see,
Right.
your 50 different Pinot Grigio bottles, for example. Most drank white varietal in the United States for Italian wines. Guess what? The
Right.
least drank white varietal of white wine is in Italy. Pinot Grigio.
Pinot
So
Grigio. Yeah.
it's that mismatch. So that's why, because they're used to that. Also, the labeling is very complicated. Italian labeling is very, very complicated. United States, that's, I think, something they really do to help consumers. Labeling is very precise, concise, and straightforward. The
Right.
varietal is key. It's always front and center. But here's a problem. Italy is the country that has the most grape varietals in the world. Depending on how you're counting, some average estimate about 2,800, of which about 600 to 800 are indigenous. It's impossible to know all those grape varietals and all these
Right.
like really weird words. So it is intimidating. But I loved what you said before. Like, if you can't pronounce it, you should be drinking it. I think that's great.
Right. Just say it wrong, but get the bottle, because that's where you get the fun, interesting. And by the way, that's where you get the value because wines that
100%.
everybody already knows about, like you said, California Cab or California Chard, or, these regions are a premium now because everyone knows about them and they're in demand. These lesser known regions or varietals, not that Puglia is lesser known, but lesser known varietals, or if you find a lesser known region, you're going to get more for the money because they're still building, building a name for
One,
themselves. And so,
100%. They're incredible value wines. Also, you're talking products that we pledge to always bring in regardless of hype or anything else. Susumanilo right now is in a very hype moment per se.
yeah,
It's getting a lot of attention from international critiques. The story is coming to life. It's very cool. We always pledge to do none of that, especially on things that we're bringing in. That means
okay,
we control the different steps. We just don't do that. If this bottle was coming in through any other like large American importer and American distribution company, it's 50, $60 on the shelf. We don't do
wow,
that. We pledge not to do that. The bottle doesn't
that's
change
amazing.
hands
Thank you.
all those times. When bottles of wine change hands, the reality
The
of fact
money,
is
yeah, it gets added on every single time.
the wine doesn't get better or worse. It just gets more
Right.
expensive. So, if
That
we
is so
can
true.
do our part in that, and, it helps consumers, learn new grapes or try new things. I tell everybody, kind of like you're saying, if you're Russian roulette, because I get the question like, what do I try? I don't know. Like, stay away from the big name and get a variety that you never heard of before, which kind of like, I
Love that.
think in a different way goes exactly for what you were saying. Like, if you
Yes.
can't pronounce it, drink it. I love it.
With this Susu, what would you mentioned a pairing for the Brindisi, but for this one, what would be your favorite pairing?
So here's the thing.
Other than meditating.
I was going to say, my bias on this one is, so no, jokes aside, I think this wine is so majestic. You're going for the wine and not the pairing, first of all.
Okay.
It'll make anything shine. It's that good, that interesting. And the fact that it's so like different and evolving from the bite to the finish, it'll kind of like you get a value of things all over that'll kind of like really shine. Now, that said, this would be something that obviously will do well from your pasta dish to your ragu. Like, for example, if you're doing like a wild boar ragu
Ooh,
would be, I
yum.
think, amazing. Or if you're doing like a more complex white sauce, like if you're doing like a little white truffle cream sauce with a little bit of wild mushrooms and extra virgin olive oil, things like that. Or if you're just doing your brisket, I think it would pair nice. But here's the shocker on this one. I really like this with the seafood as well. By the way, I'm
Interesting.
strongly against the whole white seafood, red meat
Red
thing.
meat.
Wine is, like I said, it's complex. Wine is too complex to be able to put in a box like that. And anybody that
Yes.
does that,
Yeah.
I think it's,
Not anymore. That used to be a thing, but yeah.
unfortunately, it still is. You go out to eat, chances are like you'll hear that a lot. But this will do really nice with a nicer seafood protein as well.
Okay.
Whether it's a branzino or a rockfish, that's grilled, has a little. You're going to get a little bit more body and structure from the protein itself. But if it's
Okay.
in like a more elegant sauce, whether it's like a lemon white wine flambe, or even like a slight puttanesca, for example, where you get also the salinity of the capers that really brings out. It'll do really, really nice with that, surprisingly.
Love
And
that.
I actually enjoy
And
that a lot.
now you are making me hungry. I need all these dishes right now. Well, Enzo, this has been so amazing. So if folks want to connect with you on social media or find out more about your wines, of course, I'm going to post the links on my site, but where should they go to search you out?
So my personal profile is Tasting Wine with Enzo, which they can find all my events.
I just want to thank you so much for these two amazing, interesting, unique wines.
Thank you.
And just say cheers. Thank you so much.
Salute!
Salute, as
Salute
you
in
say.
Italian.